Your due diligence process is probably missing 4 key parts. I'm here to break those down for you and how making sure that you take care of them before the closing means you have less problems after. I'm Jennifer Rowlands, landlord, educator, advocate, and broker at One Focus Property Management. And if you're involved in real estate investing, you're probably using a due diligence checklist that you've come up with on your own through experience, or maybe your realtor's providing it for you, or you're getting it on a website like BiggerPockets. And those are great lists. However, I work with investors who are buying property every day, and I find that they are consistently not making these 4 things that I'm going to describe for you a part of their process. Now, here's the thing. This is not a complete due diligence checklist. I don't want you to think it is. I want you to think about these things I'm calling attention to and decide if you need to add them to your current due diligence checklist. Let's get started. The first thing that you need to be asking for in your due diligence process are the leases. So if the property is occupied in any way, you want to get all the leases that are current on that property. Now, that is to include lead-based disclosure forms and any addendums and records of any security deposit that they have on hand. So you're going to want to make sure that these are written, that they're fully signed, that the leases you're now, at least in Pennsylvania, when you buy that property, you as the landlord need to continue to follow that lease until it ends or is terminated and is able to be renegotiated. So you're going to be following the terms of that lease. If it's in writing, if it's in good shape and it's clear, fantastic. You have all the information that you need. But what happens when it's not? What happens when the rent that's on the document or the security deposit that's on the document doesn't match the security deposit on hand or the rent that the tenant's actually paying? What if the lease isn't clear about terms, about notice to vacate, or about who's paying for utilities? So if there's things that are unclear, that's your opportunity prior to closing to get those cleared up. Now, I just want to chat real quick about verbal leases. So it is possible verbal leases are legal in Pennsylvania, and it's possible that as a buyer, you'd buy a property with verbal leases on it. Well, that is your decision whether you do that or not, and it's your decision how to handle it as a contingency in your contract. I know when I look at properties, if there's verbal leases, it's important to me that there's written leases at the time of closing. So I would make that a contingency on my contract. I'd even go so far as to help by providing a lease template that I wanted them to use. But that is your opportunity pre-closing to get an understanding of what that lease is. If you're unwilling to force the issue or the seller's unwilling to cooperate with getting written leases, you should get something in writing at least detailing the following. Who is living in the property? Under what terms? So how much rent do they pay? What utilities do they pay? How much security deposit are you holding? What notice is required to terminate that lease? And those details should help you move forward. But if you don't ask the question until you own the property, you're going to have an issue to figure out. The second thing I think it's really important to ask for are the tenant ledgers. So a tenant ledger is simply a recording of the charges and payments that the tenant has made on their account. Now, if the tenant currently owes money to the seller, is this crucial for you to know? No, because it's not money that they owe you, right? It's the money that they owe their current landlord for the rent that they're going to incur while they own it. Why it's important to know about these ledgers is you want to know the payment history. You want to know how this tenant pays so that you're prepared. It's not something to stop a deal over, but it is really great information. And so interestingly, I was just on the phone today with a potential new client and I was explaining to them, hey, he's buying a property. And I was explaining, hey, these are the things you need to be asking for. And he said, I did ask for the tenant ledgers. And in fact, I asked my bank to make them a requirement for the financing. So he's actually got that required in his contract by way of the financing contingency. So that's a really interesting way to go about it. I can't endorse it. I just heard about it, but I'll say that's a really clever way to get the information you want. The third thing you need to be asking for is move-in condition reports and evidence. So landlords do this in all different kinds of ways. Sometimes they just use a move-in condition form that both tenant and landlord fill out and sign. Sometimes they do pictures, or if they're like One Focus, we use video. Those need to be turned over with the lease, with the lead-based paint disclosure, and with all the tenant information. And so if you're not getting that, That's an issue. Here's why. When that tenant goes to move out, you don't have any evidence of the condition of the property when they received it, when you didn't own the property and they're the only ones with information. So if you're able to get those things, they're very, very valuable, and I encourage you to get them. Maybe they don't exist though. Maybe the seller didn't do any kind of inspection report or anything like that. Well, in that condition, I encourage you as the buyer to take an account of the property the day you buy it. Then hold the tenant accountable for damages from that point forward, and you have the evidence to do that with if you properly document it at the time that you closed. It's a workaround, but it's something to think about through your due diligence process. If you're not able to hold tenants accountable to move-in condition, how much risk does that expose you to in terms of damages at move-out? The fourth and final thing I'll tell you that you need to be adding to your due diligence checklist is the rental license. It's very common in North and Northeastern Pennsylvania to have our municipalities have a rental ordinance. And these rental ordinances generally require registration, a small fee, and an inspection on a periodic basis. But without this rental license, without complying, you're not operating your rental property legally in the municipality. So you need to know when you're buying a property if it's in a municipality with a rental ordinance. And the second thing you need to know is, does that property currently comply? Because if it doesn't comply, you'll be the owner of an unlicensed rental property, and you're not entirely sure what it's going to take to get it licensed. You're not sure if there's any health and safety issues that need to be identified. So you might be faced with repairs and improvements right off the bat that you weren't planning for. So make sure during your due diligence process to ask, is the property currently licensed? And if it is, get evidence of that. Get a copy of the license. If the people in your transaction aren't being open with it, you can file a right to know request with the municipality, and they will inform you. So why am I so insistent you get these four things? Because here's the truth. If you can't get a lease or it's verbal, you can't get tenant history for payments, if you can't get the rental license, or if there's no moving condition reform, you can still buy this property. It can still be a great deal. Here's what though, there's gonna be some surprises. There's gonna be some things you didn't expect. And so my goal in helping you add these to your due diligence checklist is to eliminate surprises, adjust and account for risk. And I think it's really valuable that you add them to your checklist. And I think that you should be making your sales contracts contingent on receiving this information quickly and early in the process. It's important for you to know before you've gone to too much trouble for paying for appraisals or paying for inspections, that the property that was represented to you is in actuality what it's supposed to be. So again, I'm not saying it's the end of the world to not have good information on this, but if you don't, it represents risk. Now, if you use a good property manager like One Focus Property Management, we help you iron out all these problems and make it happen. But if you're on your own, these are things that you really need to be prepared for. Making videos for you is a joy. Please let me know what you'd like to know more about, and check out some of these other videos with other tips just for real estate investors.